Rise and shine. It begins right now with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda. We have a packed show for you. We'll tell you all the details after the news as we say good morning to Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Supporters of South Africa's economic freedom fighters held a night vigil last night ahead of the pre-sentencing proceedings for their leader, Julius Malema, today. Malema was found guilty of discharging a firearm during the party's 5th birthday celebrations at the Sisa Stadium in Mdantsane back in 2018. His conviction includes the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging a firearm in a built-up area, and reckless endangerment. Thousands of EFF supporters have descended in East London to show support for their leader. EFF Secretary-General Marshall Dlamini believes this is a political attack on the party, saying they will support Malema's appeal on the judgment.
She must not waste our time. She must say what she wants to say. She must bring that sentencing, then we'll determine the next course of action. But one thing they must know, and South Africans must know, and the voters and members of the EFF, is that the president of the EFF in the afternoon is going back to Winnie House to continue with the work that he was elected to lead the struggle for the poor and the landless of this country. So we're not even worried. He's going back to Gauteng on Monday. He's got an office to report to at Winnie House to continue with the work of the EFF.
Ugandan police have detained a legislature and senior officials of the country's biggest opposition party for his alleged role in election-related violence in which at least 7 people were killed. The lawmaker Mwanga Kivumbi is the vice president of the opposition party, the National Unity Platform, headed by pop star turned politician Bobby Wine, who has been in hiding since last week. Police say machete-wielding opposition goons organised by Kivumbi attacked a police station and a vote tallying centre. Hundreds of NUP supporters and officials have been detained before and after the election in what the opposition says has been a campaign to intimidate them. Deadly drone strikes have left people in and around central Sudan's Al Obeid mourning and worried as the country's brutal civil war closes in on the army-controlled city. Residents said the attacks have intensified and caused significant civilian deaths in at least 2 cases. Al Obeid is a key Sudanese city and the capital of the North Kordofan state. Drones have become a key weapon, with in particular using them to take over the army's early air dominance. The Supreme Court of Appeal has dismissed with cause the South African Heritage Resource Agency, or SAHRA's bid to appeal the Gauteng Province High Court judgment that refused to grant the agency's bid to block the sale of assets that are associated with the late former President Nelson Mandela, owned by Dr. Makaziwe Mandela and Christo Brand. The issue raised in the appeal is whether the assets privately owned by the pair are heritage resources as contemplated in the National Heritage Resources Act. Kenny Mapanga has the story.
The South African Heritage Resources Agency contended that the various assets, which include a broken key and a copy of the 1996 Constitution signed by former President Nelson Mandela, are heritage objects. The appellate court, however, concluded that the agency failed to establish this claim and left only speculative arguments as to what might be the basis for its application, which the court says is not how litigation of this serious nature should be conducted. The appeal was dismissed with costs.
Several passengers have been injured in the third rail accident in Spain in less than a week. The commuter train hit a crane near Cartagena, but it did not derail. Francisco Hernandez is a local official.
They were carrying out cable replacement work and turned the crane's lifting platform, but unfortunately it collided with the side of the train's locomotive, causing windows to break. It appears that 3 people were injured, but fortunately their injuries are minor.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Zambia women national football team coach Ndoro says she's targeting the semi-final spot at the WAFCON. Ex-marathon record holder Bridget Kosgei trades Kenya for Turkey at Olympics. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's Rise and Shine time. It's Friday. A happy one. It's the 23rd of January. Wake up with us, Africa, and thank you so much for making us your choice of news and current affairs from the African perspective. We are Channel Africa, live from Johannesburg. That's where our studios are in South Africa. You can connect with us on channelafrica.co.za. You can connect with us on the SABC Plus mobile app, and you can also connect at Channel Africa 1. That is our social media handle. Across the various social media platforms, you'll find us. But we also live stream on YouTube and Facebook Live. My name is Asanda Beda, and it's your favorite day of the week.
I am such a happy person right now.
Morning, Peter Ndoro.
And can I just say, my Shona name is Farai, which in Shona means be happy.
Okay.
So today I'm jabularing like you can't believe because Farai it's Farai Day.
Well, good morning, gentlemen.
There you go. Yes, a very good morning, Africa. And yeah, we've got a packed show for you. We're going to be looking at a lot of issues. Some of them not great stories, unfortunately, because in Sudan, that conflict that's been going on for nearly 2 years now, since 2023, has seen children miss as many as 500 days of school. And that's a tragedy. So we'll be unpacking the situation there with somebody from UNICEF in Sudan.
And as you say, Sudan, things are looking bleak, and drone strikes also is another story we'll be looking at that have intensified in and around the central Sudanese city of El Obeid. Those stories and more coming up on this edition, Friday edition of Rise and Shine. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your questions and comments about our show.
Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa, it's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
9 minutes past 6 Central Africa time, and it's time for our daily Africa Roundup. And each morning, just after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you a concise update on the key developments shaping the continent and the world over the past 24 hours, with insights from our team of journalists, analysts, and newsmakers. We place the day's biggest stories into context, helping you stay informed, connected, and also prepared for the day ahead. Let's begin with this story, where drone strikes have intensified in and around the central Sudanese city of El Obeid, as fighting edges closer to areas held by the National Army. Residents report that at least 2 recent attacks have killed and injured civilians. Diane To reports.
Residents said the attacks have intensified and caused significant civilian deaths in at least 2 cases. One of them, in early January, injured Hawa Koko's arm, she said. Koko said the attack took place after the Isha night prayers.
After the drone hit, they got us out and took us to the hospital. Some of us were injured and others were dead.
Neighbor Musa Adam showed Reuters the remains of a building. He said he saw it being destroyed in the attack.
When we came, we found children under the rubble, under the iron, under the beds. Only God knows the state of the children. Bodies. They used to be living people and they became dead bodies. This is what happened.
El Obeid is a key Sudanese city and the capital of North Kordofan state. That's part of the wider Kordofan region, standing between the army-controlled eastern half of the country and the Darfur stronghold of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF.
Staying in Sudan, Il Hilal El Fasher Football Club has returned to competitive play in the central city of El Obeid after being forced from its hometown by the conflict. Several of the club's players were among more than 100,000 people who fled the city of Al Fasher as violence and famine tightened their grip on the region.
Since late October 2024, the Rapid Support Forces have taken control of the area following an 18-month siege that plunged the city into famine. The team are preparing for the Sudanese Premier League, the first competition since the war between the Sudanese army and the RSF erupted in 2023. Head coach Ayman Hassan says they are providing support to the squad.
We are working on a program that focuses on the psychological rehabilitation of the players. A psychiatrist is present with us in the team's camp, and the tactical staff is working on preparing the players psychologically and mentally so we can change the state of sadness and despair into a positive state, so that they can perform in the matches in a way that benefits the will of the people of Al Fasher and the people of Sudan in general.
Turning to the Caribbean now, the head of the United Nations mission in Haiti says that the country has reached a critical moment in efforts to restore its democratic institutions. The UN Security Council has been briefed ahead of a key political deadline, with the current transitional authorities due to step down on the 7th of February. UN Special Representative Carlos Ruiz Massieu warns that there is little time left for further delays.
Mr. President, at this critical juncture, I have continued to exercise the good offices of the Secretary General in support of Haitian-led efforts to ease political tensions. Engagement with political stakeholders, civil society, women and youth groups, and institutional counterparts has focused on fostering inclusive exchanges around security, electoral priorities, governance challenges, and impunity concerns. BINU will continue to facilitate inter-Haitian consultations and encourage stakeholders to engage constructively on ways to create the necessary conditions to end the transition and restore democratic institutions.
And finally, a zoo in the German city of Frankfurt has welcomed a new addition to its great ape family. An infant born in December brings the total number of great apes at the zoo to 18. Frankfurt zookeeper Stefan Greff has more.
The baby was born on December 7th, 2025. The mother is Mixie and the infant is named Faro. Faro is the name of a national park in Cameroon. We always try to give our animals names from their countries of origin, or at least from their continent of origin. And the baby is doing very well. He is well protected and cared for by his mother. He drinks milk, sleeps a lot, is groomed by his mother, so everything is perfect.
That's how we come to the end of this Friday's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll bring you this again here on Rise and Shine from the Monday's perspective of the Roundup, and that's going to be coming up after the 6 a.m. news. So stay with us.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspective africaine.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Yes, thank you very much indeed for choosing Channel Africa as your way to start your news day. Let's go to Guinea-Bissau now, where the transitional authorities there have announced the presidential and legislative elections will be held on December the 6th this year, marking the first official electoral timetable since the November 2025 coup. Now, this move is closely watched by the Economic Community of West African States, the regional body, otherwise known as ECOWAS, which has been pressing for a shorter, inclusive transition. Tuton Ngobeni picks up the story.
The December 6th date for Guinea-Bissau's presidential and legislative election was set by a presidential decree signed by Transitional President General Horta Inta. It states that the vote will be organized under conditions that will be progressively put in place to ensure elections that are free, fair, and transparent. The announcement comes as the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has intensified diplomatic efforts in recent weeks to push the junta toward a rapid restoration of constitutional order. Earlier this month, a high-level ECOWAS mission led by Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio, the bloc's current chair, traveled to the capital Bissau to press transitional leaders on the transition timeline. While the transitional authorities have now set an election date, ECOWAS has yet to issue an official reaction to the December 2026 timeline. The regional bloc had previously rejected an initial transition calendar proposed by the coup leaders and continues to demand the release of all political detainees as well as guarantees for the protection of national institutions by the ECOWAS mission in Guinea-Bissau, ECOMIB. It has not ruled out targeted sanctions should it deem the process obstructed. General Horta Inta seized power on November 26 last year after the military interrupted the electoral process just 24 hours before the official announcement of results from the November 23 presidential and legislative elections. Those polls had been described as free, transparent, and peaceful by ECOWAS and several international observer missions. Following the coup, ECOWAS suspended Guinea-Bissau from its decision-making bodies and called for a civilian-led transition. The transitional authorities later adopted a political charter of the transition on November 27 last year, which now serves as the legal basis for the December electoral timetable. For Channel Africa News, I am Tuton Ngobeni in Johannesburg.
And we'll be discussing this story a little further in the next hour with analysis from Austin Ayigbe, who's an advocacy officer at the West African Democracy Solidarity Network.
Let's look at this story now as the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, South Africa's key partner in the criminal justice system, prepares for new leadership under Advocate Andy Mutibi at the end of the month. Minister of Justice Mamoloko Kubai has routinely stressed the need to implement reforms at the NPA, particularly lifestyle audits. But the question lies in who has the authority to authorize such reforms and what are the implications regarding public trust in state agencies. Zara Groenewald reports.
As the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batoy, bows out at the end of the month, the Justice Minister is calling for tough restructuring in the office of the country's Chief Prosecutor, including the introduction of lifestyle audits. This is Justice Minister Mamoloko Kubai.
There are various issues, both raised by the current NDPP in terms of the environment, the issues that needs to be addressed, that we have committed that we need to do. One of the issues that is coming through is the salary. The wage package of the NDPP, in how it's structured, in how it's an issue. That's one. The security of tenure, both in terms of the NDPP and the deputies and everybody in the organization, how it's structured, it's an issue that we needed to. So there are reforms that are needed in NPA.
But the Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, Lawson Naidoo, says inasmuch as this is necessary, it's going to be a tall order as the implementation and enforcement of lifestyle audits is beyond the minister's powers.
Whilst, again, the Constitution says that the Minister of Justice has final responsibility over the National Prosecuting Authority, that is not clarified in the National Prosecuting Authority Act nor anywhere else. So this is an issue that needs to be discussed and agreed between the Minister and the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
Naidoo adds that the call is long overdue after appeals for the NPA to regain public trust, but he insists this cannot happen overnight.
But this is will be a large undertaking. It will require significant resources for this to happen, and the minister will therefore need to make those funds available to ensure that the NPA is in fact able to conduct this exercise in the way that is envisaged. I doubt that there will be much resistance from the leadership of the NPA to initiate this process, but it is one that will need to be discussed and agreed upon with timeframes and with, as I say, an appropriate resource allocation.
Organisation Undoing Tax Abuse CEO Wayne Duvenege says the adherence to lifestyle audits is dependent on the political will of the powers that be to ensure accountability and transparency.
So we've got all the systems in place. Guess what would happen? You wouldn't need lifestyle audits, you'd have accountability. But unfortunately, going down that route doesn't suit many people in positions of high places, right up in senior government levels, because they and their friends and their cronies are connected to the networks that take advantage of weak systems and plunder the finances of this country.
And he says for that to happen, the president must lead the pack.
The politicians speak eloquently about this, but will they actually do it? They've got the power, and where, as you say, where does that lie? Who does it? Well, you've got Parliament, you've got SARS, you've got so many enforcement and oversight mechanisms that can start to introduce everything that we talk about to drive accountability. The question is, where is the political will and the desire? That's the only component that's missing.
With the NPA set to start a new chapter at the end of the month, only time will tell if it will breathe new energy into the organisation or if the minister's calls fall on deaf ears. Zara Groenewald in Johannesburg.
The National Prosecuting Authority in South Africa says that they've enough evidence to charge the accused in the fatal Scholar transport accident, Asanda, with murder. Dudla was behind the wheel when the minibus collided with a truck on Monday morning, killing 14 learners. He appeared before a Johannesburg magistrate court yesterday. Tabiso Khadebe has more.
There was a strong police presence inside and outside the Vanderbijlpark Magistrates Court as Ayanda Dudla made his first appearance following the fatal road accident. Some family members of the deceased children were also in court.
I'll again just request everyone, there's many people in court today, please try and let's try and keep this structured court proceedings. Mrs. de Klerk from the defense's side, please.
The 22-year-old is now facing charges including 14 counts of murder, 3 of attempted murder, driving without a valid permit and operating an unlicensed vehicle. Before the charge sheet was amended, Dudla was charged with culpable homicide and reckless and negligent driving. National Prosecuting Authorities spokesperson Lumkama Hanjana says they have enough evidence to charge Dudla with murder.
We found that we have prima facie evidence to prefer murder charges against the accused. Hence, he is now facing 14 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 3 other counts of charges related to contravention the Trafficking Act. You must understand that this incident happened this week, so there's still a lot of investigations that the state needs to be finalized. There is still witness statements that still need to be taken. There's forensics that still need to get their results. So hence then the matter is postponed to the 5th of March for further investigation.
The South African National Civic Organization says the accused should be denied bail. The civic organization led a picket outside the magistrate court attended by other non-governmental organizations. Sankos Nkosinathi Ndwandwe accused Dudla of being reckless.
We are here to demonstrate, to show that we are opposing the bail. Reckless driving is detestable. If the driver did not drive the way he drove, we could not have fatalities as we speak today. So we are saying in Citybeng, the suspect which has been apprehended or arrested must not be given a bail.
Meanwhile, the family of 16-year-old Sahwadi Mate say they had hoped she would pull through after she was admitted to hospital. Her aunt, Queen Baloyi, says they are shattered.
We are heartbroken and won't forget what happened to our daughter. The family is devastated. Sahwadi's mother and father both cannot cope.
Thank you, Mr. Dudla. Your matter has been postponed 5 March 2026.
The case has been postponed for further investigation. I am Tabiso Khadebe in Vanderbijlpark.
You are in custody.
Let's go abroad now, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he has agreed on security guarantees for his country following a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. There was also diplomacy in Moscow late on Thursday with Vladimir Putin meeting the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. The meetings come ahead of, for the first time, 3-way talks between the U.S., Ukraine and Russia scheduled for later today and Saturday in the United Arab Emirates. Nick Harper has more.
This time, the US and Ukrainian leaders said their meeting on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, had been good. Hardly a ringing endorsement, but at least not a blistering row like they had in the Oval Office almost a year ago. But progress was made, with a framework agreement aimed at ending the almost 4-year conflict now seemingly nearing the final stages. After the meeting, Volodymyr Zelensky said a document detailing security guarantees for Ukraine is now done. Zelensky said the document still needed to be signed, something which would happen, he said, only after the war ends. Those guarantees have been a major sticking point in negotiations. Kyiv wants commitments from allies to help prevent another invasion by Russia. Zelensky told world leaders gathered in Switzerland that he was living Groundhog Day, another winter of Russian attacks. He urged a tougher response from Europe and said security guarantees were vital, adding the backstop of Trump is needed to ensure Ukraine's future security. The upcoming 2 days of trilateral meetings in Abu Dhabi are an important moment in the peace process. According to Ukraine's leader, it's the first time that all three countries, Ukraine, the United States and Russia, have sat down for negotiations to try and find an end to the war. Renewed momentum to try and find a solution and bring peace to Ukraine. The issue of territory, though, and what exactly Russia gets to keep, remains a point of major contention. President Trump finished up his time in Davos by saying it was still an ongoing process. Nick Harper, SABC News, Washington.
Well, do get in touch with us on Rise and Shine at Channel Africa 1. That's where we are on social media. We are on the platforms of X, of Facebook, of Instagram, of TikTok, of LinkedIn and YouTube. It's time now for our news headlines. It's almost 6:30 Central African, and we get those details from Jolane Tulongwepe. Also to come is our update from the world of sports, as well as our update from the world of business. Over to you, Jolane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malema, will be back in the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape today for pre-sentencing proceedings. This follows his conviction for discharging a firearm during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebrations at the Sisa Tukashe Stadium in Mdantsane in 2018. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is following the post-election situation in Uganda with concern. That's according to a statement released by his spokesperson. And finally, several passengers have been injured in the third rail accident in Spain in less than a week. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to get our first full sports news bulletin as we say good morning to you, Brafix Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We kick off with football news. Zambia women national soccer team coach Ndoro says she's targeting the semi-final spot at this year's Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON in Morocco. Ndoro is excited that her team has been placed in a tough group at the WAFCON tournament, a group that consists of Nigeria, Egypt and Malawi. She noted that having such tough opponents at the beginning of the tournament will psyche their players to be fully prepared from the beginning as opposed to shifting through the gears as it progresses. The Copper Queens will kick off their campaign against Egypt on the 18th of March at the Labi Zauli Stadium before engaging the Super Falcons of Nigeria on the 21st of March. On to athletics. Kenya's ex-marathon record holder, Bridget Kosgei, says she and 4 other Kenyans will compete for Turkey at the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Kosgei, a silver medalist at the Tokyo Olympics, says fellow runner Ronald Kwemoi, a silver medalist at the Paris Games, will also switch to Turkey along with 3 others. The others 2 switch flags are the less well-established trio of Catherine Amanangole, Brian Kimbor, and Nelvin Jepkengboy. The Olympic Charter requires an athlete to wait 3 years after last competing for one country before switching to another. Kosgei has won numerous marathons, including London, Chicago, Madrid, and Tokyo. The world of sport has shifted to neighboring countries across the globe co-hosting sport. The event versus the past, where a single country would co-host. Zimbabwean sports administrator Turai Jani says the second and the 2 developing Southern African countries will benefit from staging the tournament together.
I personally think it's a good idea for this tournament to be hosted in both countries. In the case of Zimbabwe and Namibia, both countries are still developing their cricket infrastructure, so it's a mutually beneficial relationship, especially given that both countries are set to host the 2027 ODI World Cup along with SA. This gives a big boost to both countries, and it also eliminates the barriers that we have in terms of the borders.
Jani, who is the General Secretary of the Zimbabwean Premier League 2024 champion Simba Bora FC, speaks about what co-hosting the Under-19 World Cup means for a country like Zimbabwe.
Cricket is one of the fastest growing sports in Zim, second only to football and ahead of rugby. The World Cup is a growth opportunity for the game in Zim. Remember, sports is a big impact on nations in terms of marketing. So it takes us to good heights in terms of us being recognized as a country internationally.
We will end with tennis news. Tennis greats Martina Navratilova and Lindsay Davenport took Naomi Osaka to task, saying she had failed to keep to basic etiquette after the Australian Open flashpoint. The Japanese star's second-round win against Sorana Cestea was marred by a testy exchange and icy handshake at the end. Veteran Cestea, in her 18th and last visit to Melbourne Park before retiring, took issue with Osaka shouting "come on" between the Romanian's first and second serves. During her on-court interview, two-time Australian Open winner Osaka was dismissive of Cestea but later apologized for being disrespectful. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Coming up, we'll be talking South Africa hosting the World Economic Forum's Spring Summit in 2027, and this being a major endorsement of the country's growing stature as a global business and events destination. That's here on Rise and Shine. Stay with us.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
There's a Ugandan lawmaker. His name is Atkins Katusabe, who speaks with an American accent in Parliament. So the parliamentarians have complained that we don't understand what you are saying.
Listen to him. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, I think this is a disaster that could cause an extinction of our entire community. Going to procedure.
Mr. Speaker, the English that is trying to put this matter here is confusing a number of us and making us miss very serious issue. It needs to speak the common English of Uganda. English is too much.
Need a piece of paper so that we'll be able to read. The English is too much. I picture him saying order, out of order.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. As Africa renews, so does its voices. 60 years of Channel Africa.
Let's say good morning now to Nosipho Zuma for the first time on this Friday morning. She has our business update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, negotiations are back on the table for South Africa's steel giant. Now, after a tense standoff last year, ArcelorMittal South Africa and the Industrial Development Corporation have officially resumed talks regarding a potential state-led buyout. Discussions hit a wall last year after AMSA rejected a $520 million offer, citing disagreements over valuation and strategic positioning. SABC News understands that several companies have now expressed interest in supporting the IDC's acquisition to provide the financial support needed to bridge the previous valuation gap. Tshepo Budibe is the Industrial Development Corporation spokesperson.
The Industrial Development Corporation has taken note of ArcelorMittal's latest further cautionary announcement. It affirms that the IDC remains in ongoing discussion with the company, the ArcelorMittal Group, government partners including the DTIC, to find a lasting solution to the steelmakers' current difficulties and protect South Africa's vital steel manufacturing capability.
Wholesale trade sales fell by 0.8% in November compared with a year ago. This latest data released by Stats SA points to weaker underlying demand in South Africa's wholesale trade sector. Wholesale trade sales reflect goods purchased in large quantities from manufacturers or producers. However, on a month-on-month basis, seasonally adjusted sales rebounded, rising by 2% in November from October. SABC News economic reporter Nosipho Radebe has more.
That follows modest growth in October and a contraction in September. Over the 3 months to November, wholesale trade sales increased by 0.5% compared with the previous 3-month period. In nominal terms, sales grew by 1.2% year-on-year in November, driven mainly by dealers in solid, liquid and gaseous fuels, which rose 5% and made the largest contribution to growth. For the 3 months ended November, wholesale trade sales were up 1% compared with the same period last year, supported largely by stronger sales of machinery, equipment and supplies. Nosipho Radebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
South African fashion retailer Truworths International says its half-year profit was likely to be flat to around 2% higher as constrained consumer spending has led to lower sales at its Africa business. Truworths, which also operates in the UK, says it expects headline earnings per share, one of the main profit measures used in South Africa, to be between 489 cents and 499 cents in the next 6 months ended December 28, from 482.2 cents in the prior year, when headline earnings per share fell 4.6%. And South Korea has enacted the world's first comprehensive law regulating artificial intelligence. The Ministry of Science said it was designed to promote AI and build a foundation of safety and trust. The BBC's Shakira Abdi has the details.
The law requires companies to safeguard users from misinformation. It also aims to prevent abuse of AI technology, such as deepfake content. This includes applying watermarks to AI-generated content so people can see where it is. There's lots of disagreement over regulating AI, with some people expressing concern that this will slow innovation. The US is in favour of a more light-touch approach. Companies in South Korea will be given a 1-year grace period before any penalties might be imposed.
And finally, Spotify has rolled out Prompted Playlist, which is an artificial intelligence-powered feature in the United States and Canada that allows premium users tailor playlists using their listening habits and commands. Now, after its successful run in New Zealand, the expansion is the latest in a series of AI-powered updates on the Swedish streaming platform as it looks to attract more users to its subscription plans from free tier. Spotify says the new feature will position users as active participants who direct the algorithm using their own words and intentions rather than being passive recipients of suggestions provided by the streaming platform. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 420. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 20. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 29. And in Zambia, it's 19 kwacha 97. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rubles 307. Russia is 72 rubles 22. India, it's 91 rupees 58. China, it's 6 yuan 97. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 16 rand 20. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,959 and platinum at $2,674 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.48 a barrel. Now, for any stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Suma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
South Africa will host the World Economic Forum's Spring Summit in 2027, and this is a major endorsement of the country's growing stature as a global business and events destination. The announcement was made during a media briefing in Davos in Switzerland on Thursday by South Africa's delegation, where Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille welcomed the decision, saying that the honour reflects South Africa's proven capacity to host large-scale international events and its strategic investment in business tourism. She said that the summit will further boost economic growth, job creation and efforts to build a more inclusive economy. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe tells us more.
South Africa's global influence continues to command attention following the announcement that the country has been elected to host the World Economic Forum's Spring Summit in 2027. This milestone underscores South Africa's standing as a credible and capable partner in global economic dialogue, as well as its growing role in shaping conversations on development, trade, and inclusive growth. Speaking during the media briefing in Davos, Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille welcomed the decision, saying the honour reflects South Africa's proven capacity to host large-scale international events and its strategic investment in business tourism.
Let me start by thanking the World Economic Forum for selecting South Africa to host the Spring Davos in 2027. We are ready, able and willing, and we look forward to us having been afforded this opportunity to host Davos Spring. South Africa is the leading business events destination in the continent and in the Middle East. Business events and tourism adds about 8.8% to the GDP of South Africa and creates at least 1.8 million jobs annually.
She said the summit will further boost economic growth, job creation, and efforts to build a more inclusive economy while highlighting past successes.
So this will further strengthen our sector to create more jobs and to assist us in building that inclusive economy. Now, we have hosted now with the G20 more than 135 business events all over South Africa that led to the Leaders Summit at the end of November. And we have illustrated that, our capacity to host business events. We do invest as South Africa to compete in the rest of the world to host international events. We have got our own South African National Convention Bureau where we invest money and we go out around the world and we bid for international conferences to be hosted in South Africa. Last year, we put out a bid for 65 events. So far, we have secured 35 international events.
South Africa's Trade Minister Pakstow said Africa, despite few setbacks, possesses enormous potential for growth.
Africa is well positioned today. While challenges remain, clear progress is evident. Improved policy and regulatory environments, stronger institutions, fewer conflict hotspots, and a growing wave of youth-led startups attracting global venture capital. Across our engagements this week, both venture capitalists and traditional investors express strong confidence in Africa's growth potential and their desire to expand on the continent. Africa is central to the global race for critical minerals, holding an estimated 30% of the world's proven reserves in sub-Saharan Africa alone. As demand for energy transition and advanced manufacturing grows, Spring Davos highlights Africa's rising strategic role in the global economy.
Building on the momentum of South Africa's successful hosting of the G20 summit last November, International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola said global platforms such as the WEF provide a critical opportunity to advance the outcomes of the G20 presidency. He highlighted agreements reached by world leaders to increase funding for climate action, disaster prevention, and post-disaster reconstruction.
This setting is thus an ideal platform for South Africa to further advance its G20 presidency outcomes, in particular those reached at the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg on the 22nd and the 23rd of November 2025. And we are continuing even here in this platform. The G20 leaders recognize, amongst others, in addition to what our Minister of Finance have said, that climate change is having the greatest effect on countries and communities that are most vulnerable. They agreed on increased funding and support for countries to prevent disasters and to rebuild in the wake of devastating climate disasters. And this rings very true to our communities in South Africa because as we speak, the eastern part and the northern part and some coastal provinces are being ravaged by disaster, and most parts of Mozambique. There was an agreement on increased funding for climate action. This is particularly important for countries across the sub-Saharan continent and the whole of Africa.
Lamola further noted that G20 leaders agreed that countries rich in critical minerals must derive greater value from their extraction through beneficiation at source.
The G20 leaders also agreed that critical minerals that the world needs should benefit those countries and communities where those minerals are found and extracted. Beneficiation at source also spoke on issues of artificial intelligence, the role of the African continent, particularly in research and innovation. Also, a report by Professor Joseph Stiglitz on inequality, which recommended a high-level panel, which we also look forward to take through various multilateral platforms.
The hosting of the Spring Summit is expected to deliver tangible economic benefits, including increased investment exposure, tourism growth, and job creation. More importantly, it provides South Africa with a strategic platform to advance its development priorities, showcase innovation, and advocate for inclusive and sustainable economic models that resonate with the Global South. Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Digital safety experts in South Africa are urging tougher rules on how sensitive content is shared online during moments of tragedy. That's a story we'll be looking at in just a bit, so stay tuned on Channel Africa.
As the sun rises on 2026, Channel Africa celebrates with you. This year, may prosperity flow like water. May unity strengthen our nations. And may every African story inspire the world.
Channel Afrique vous accompagne dans cette célébration. Que l'espoir illumine notre continent.
Que as vozes de África ecoem com orgulho.
Ustawi na ufanisi na vitiririke kama maji.
From all of us at Channel Africa, we wish you and yours a joyful, successful, and prosperous 2026.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Digital safety experts in South Africa are urging tougher rules on how sensitive content is shared online during moments of tragedy. They warn that unverified or graphic images can spread within minutes, deepening the trauma for families and communities affected. Recent cases, including a deadly school transport crash and the death of Warwick Stock, also known as DJ Warus, who's a popular South African DJ and media personality have highlighted how videos and photos often circulate widely before relatives are officially informed. The experts say stronger oversight and more responsible online behavior are urgently needed. SABC reporter Calvin Mabasa has more.
Recently, South Africans have mourned the death of prominent media personality Warwick Stock, better known as DJ Warus, who was shot and killed in Johannesburg last month. In a separate tragedy on Monday near Vanderbijl Park, a scholar transport vehicle collided with a truck, claiming the lives of 14 school children. Disturbing images and videos of the victims circulated widely online before families had been informed. Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona says this not only adds to the family's grief, but also spreads misinformation and causes further trauma.
We are grieving. They are generating posters utilizing AI. Meanwhile, families are grieving. We are giving a different picture altogether, circulating graphics that are not accurate. We are using AI just for probably social media or for content reasons.
Clinical psychologist Leseho Lekwatani warns that the mental and emotional impact of seeing such content online can be serious, especially for families directly affected by tragedy. Lekwatani says seeing images can intensify grief and make it harder to process the loss.
Research has actually found that you can experience PTSD symptoms just from, looking at the content online. And so you can have things like intrusive thoughts, you can have things like flashbacks, you can have things like nightmares about the content. So to come across content like that when you're just scrolling unexpectedly is, it's incredibly traumatic, and it's impersonal because it's not coming from someone who is within the family or someone who is supported supposed to be sharing those news. But then I think with the grieving process as well, when there is the constant re-exposure to those images, it keeps that event alive in a way.
Media experts say the problem goes beyond artificial intelligence, with untrained users posting sensitive content under the guise of citizen journalism. University of Johannesburg's Dr. Sanele Gamede says the pressure to be first often outweighs consideration around ethics and the dignity of victims.
I think it's becoming a little bit dangerous, especially at the hands of people who do not know what they're doing, at the hands of people who are not trained and don't understand the consequences of publishing anything. It could be a story, it could be a video. People are just posting content. In fact, I don't even know whether we do have the word citizen journalism anymore.
Experts say it is not only the responsibility of social media platforms, but also of every user to pause, verify, and consider the consequences before sharing sensitive content online. Calvin Mabasa in Johannesburg.
Now, South Africa's foreign policy is under renewed scrutiny as the country marks 32 years of democracy. Scholars and policy experts are now reflecting on Pretoria's role in a shifting global order amid rising geopolitical tensions and debates around non-alignment. Now, these discussions formed part of a webinar which was hosted by the South African Institute of International Affairs and the SACHI Chair on African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg. Here's our reporter, Lebohang Mabanga, who was following it.
Just over 30 years into democracy, South Africa's foreign policy is facing mounting pressure to adapt to a rapidly changing global landscape. This is according to contributors to a newly launched special issue of the South African Journal of International Affairs, which examines the country's diplomatic trajectory under the 7th administration and beyond. Speaking at the webinar, Professor Lisa Otto from the University of Johannesburg says South Africa is now operating in a fundamentally altered global order.
And so the special issue is really anchored in the recognition that South Africa's foreign policy is operating now in a fundamentally altered global order. And in this, of course, we see the erosion of liberal internationalism, the shift towards multipolarity, at least some actors like South Africa seeking that, rising geopolitical tensions, and the weakening of multilateralism and international law. And so the issue doesn't necessarily just ask whether South Africa should return to kind of past foreign policy ideals, but also how it navigates competing normative, strategic, and material pressures.
Prof. Otto notes that while South Africa's foreign policy has remained principled in theory, its execution has often lacked consistency.
We're finding that South Africa's foreign policy over the past 30 years shows a certain continuity in principles, but inconsistency in the articulation and implementation of those principles. Across the issue, we see that South Africa has showed a sustained commitment to Pan-Africanism, to South-South cooperation, and to multilateralism. But at the same time, these commitments have not always translated into coherent or kind of predictable strategic posture, particularly in the context of this kind of increasing global power competition between those blocs that we've seen traditionally, but now also increasingly reflected also in the strain in the transatlantic relationship.
The country's role in peace building and conflict resolution on the continent also comes under the spotlight. Dr. Tinashe Sitole from the University of Johannesburg says South Africa has maintained a consistent approach in this area.
In 30 years, passage of time, I think, as noted already, we are able to identify different patterns as well as a continuity in terms of South African foreign policy. And we do see some form of consistency in terms of features that we see in terms of peace building, as well as conflict resolution in terms of its pillars, in terms of external engagement. And we have noted how South Africa has been able to propagate dialogue, mediation, negotiated solutions, aspects that are touched in part of the special issues and in the different case studies. And we've noted that also South Africa, rather than relying on coercive power, South Africa has been able to use multilateralism as a key strategy.
However, concerns were raised about the domestic political impact of recent foreign policy disagreements within government. government. Dr. Marcel Naga from the University of Johannesburg warns that mixed messaging could erode public confidence.
For us as South Africans, those that are witnessing these public disagreements, these mixed signalings on the part of the GNU when it comes to foreign policy, it may detract our faith in our government to really get on the same page when it comes to these important issues of foreign policy. And this may be reflected later down the line when we go to vote at the polls.
The special issue ultimately raises questions about whether South Africa can maintain its long-standing diplomatic principles while responding effectively to global power shifts and domestic political pressures. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
So, today, January the 23rd, going back 2013, French and Malian forces capture Gao in Mali. This was as part of Operation Serval. French paratroopers and Malian government forces seized this strategic northern city of Gao from Islamist militants. This was a turning point in international intervention to reclaim northern Mali, but Mali's fallen out with France significantly since then, as you now know. Okay, it's a little bit before 7 o'clock. It's time to catch you up with the world of news and the second hour of Rise and Shine coming up after the news with Jualani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malema, will be back in the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape Province today for pre-sentencing proceedings. This follows his conviction for discharging a firearm during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebrations in the Sisa Tukashe Stadium in Mdantsane in 2018. Malema was charged for the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging a firearm and reckless endangerment. Lobby group AfroForum's Jacques Broodreid says he'll be surprised if the court does not slap Malema with a jail term.
It's very important to remember that these charges that Mr. Malema was found guilty on are actually very serious charges. If we look at just one example, for instance, the illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition, there have been cases where people have been sentenced to up to 15 years imprisonment for that. So it's very serious charges. Of course, there might be mitigating conditions and circumstances that the judge takes into consideration, but I would be very surprised and I would be very skeptical of the process if we at least didn't see a few years prison time for Mr. Malema.
Meanwhile, supporters of the EFF held a night vigil last night. Thousands of EFF supporters have descended in East London to show support for their leader. EFF Secretary-General Marshall Dlamini believes this is a political attack on the party, saying they will support Malema's appeal on the judgment.
She must not waste our time. She must say what she wants to say. She must bring that sentencing, then we'll determine the next course of action. But one thing they must know, and South Africans must know, and the voters and members of the EFF, is that the president of the EFF in the afternoon is going back to Winnie Madikizela House to continue with the work that he was elected to lead the struggle for the poor and the landless of this country. So we're not even worried. He's going back to Gauteng on Monday. He's got an office to report to at Winnie Madikizela House to continue with the work of the EFF.
Moving on to other news, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is following the post-election situation in Uganda with concern. That's according to a statement released by his spokesperson. Reports from the country indicate that police in Uganda have detained a key opposition lawmaker linked to presidential contender and opposition leader Bobi Wine. Uganda's 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni won a re-election on Saturday, extending his 40-year rule despite claims of vote rigging from the opposition. The HG's spokesperson, Stephen Dujarric.
The Secretary-General is following with concern the post-election situation in Uganda, including reports of arrests, detentions, and violent incidents involving opposition figures and supporters. He notes the importance of restraint by all actors and respect for the rule of law and Uganda's international human rights obligations. That includes the right of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. The Secretary-General stresses the importance of due process and humane treatment for all those in custody and underscores the need to safeguard civic space.
Deadly drone strikes have left people in and around central Sudan's El Obeid mourning and worried as the country's brutal civil war closes in on the army-controlled city. Residents say the attacks have intensified and caused significant civilian deaths in at least 2 cases. El Obeid is a key Sudanese city and the capital of the North Kordofan state. Drones have become a key weapon, with this one in particular using them to take over the army's early air dominance. And finally, several passengers have been injured in the third rail accident in Spain in less than a week. The commuter train hit a crane near Cartagena but did not derail. Francisco Hernandez is a local official.
They were carrying out cable replacement work and turned the crane's lifting platform, but unfortunately it collided with the side of the train's locomotive, causing windows to break. It appears that 3 people were injured, but fortunately their injuries are minor.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Now, sports headline. Mamelodi Sundowns are targeting another Champions League title. And Junior Proteas slumped to defeat against the West Indies. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week. From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Thank you for choosing to wake up with us, Africa. And we are together now for entering the second hour of the program. We'll be together until 9 this morning. This is Channel Africa, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. That's where our studios are. My name is Asanda Beda, and you can connect with us on channelafrica.co.za as well as the SABC Plus app via mobile phones, and you can catch us live streaming on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. Quite a few stories we'll be touching on in this hour. One of them, we go to Sudan, where millions of children have missed school because of ongoing fighting and the conflict in the country. As much as 500 days of school have been missed in terms of figures coming from there. And Save the Children is lending its voice to this crisis.
And we'll also be, and we're hoping actually to talk a little bit about Guinea-Bissau, where elections have been set for December the 6th. And this, of course, follows a coup d'etat that took place there. And ECOWAS and other bodies have been keen to see this transition back to democratic rule happen much quicker. We'll see what it all means for the democratic process in Guinea. And also Donald Trump. He's had that famous speech now at the WEF in Davos, the World Economic Forum, and he's talking about global peace. We'll unpack what he means by that and what this board of peace that he's proposing means. That's all coming up.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Foreign policy is under renewed scrutiny as the country marks 32 years of democracy. And in fact, let's take a look at this story, which is about the mining indaba that's coming in a little bit later on in the year. Climate change continues to disrupt weather patterns and place increasing strain on economies across the continent. The mining sector is under growing pressure to adapt. Organizers of this year's Mining Indaba says that the focus is firmly on how Africa's mining industry can reduce its carbon footprint whilst remaining competitive and attractive for global investors. Channel Africa economics reporter Innocent Samosa tells us what we can expect at this year's Mining Indaba.
Discussions will also center on the practical climate sustainability measures mining companies must prioritize, not only to manage climate risk and meet rising ESG expectations, but also to safeguard surrounding communities that are increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather events. Jihad Bolt, Principal Climate Sustainability, shares his view on how African mining sector can realistically reduce its carbon footprint while remaining competitive and attractive to global investors.
There is no single blueprint for decarbonizing Africa's mining sector, but a structured and disciplined approach is essential. The first and most cost-effective step is demand-side energy reduction through efficiency and optimization. Simple interventions like fixing compressed air leaks, optimizing haul route planning, and improving ventilation efficiency cut both energy use and operational cost, delivering the highest impact and lowest cost.
He says clean energy is critical in achieving this.
Mines can consider self-generating renewable power such as solar or wind to strengthen energy security and reduce emissions. Where this isn't technically viable or capital is constrained, power purchase agreements provide an accessible route to procure clean energy without upfront investment. Finally, for residual emissions, market-based mechanisms such as carbon offsets and renewable energy certificates can play a complementary role. Across all actions, the priority should be clear. Pursue interventions that deliver the greatest mitigation impact at the lowest possible cost. This structured approach enables Africa's mining sector to cut its carbon footprint while remaining competitive and attractive to global investors.
But what practical climate sustainability measures should mining companies prioritize now to manage climate risk, meet ESG expectations, and protect surrounding communities? Bolt explains.
Now, mining companies need to prioritize practical climate sustainability measures now because climate change is already affecting operations, infrastructure, and surrounding communities. The first step is a comprehensive climate risk assessment across the entire value chain to identify where climate hazards such as heat, flooding, and water stress poses the biggest threats. From there, companies should quantify the value at risk by applying damage functions to mining, processing, waste facilities, logistics, and supply chains. This allows them to prioritize adaptation measures that reduce that risk at the lowest possible cost. Water is a critical consideration, especially where mines in nearby communities compete for the same resource. Technologies like precision mining, which reduces waste and energy use, and hydraulic dry stacking, which significantly cut water consumption and tailings risk, can play a major role.
This year's Mining Indaba is scheduled to take place from the 9th to the 12th of February 2026. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Millions of children in Sudan have missed nearly 500 days of school since the conflict began in April 2023, in what has become one of the longest school closures in the world. Many schools have been damaged or are being used as shelters for displaced families, and remote learning is largely impossible. Save the Children warns that without urgent action, an entire generation risks being denied the chance to learn and build a future. We're joined live now by Mohammed Abdiladif, who is Save the Children Country Director in Sudan, to discuss the scale of this crisis and what must be done now to restore education for the children in Sudan. Mohammed, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure. More than 500 days of schools missed by children in Sudan. That's the figure we have currently. From your perspective, what kind of damage is this causing to the education system? And as far as maybe zooming into the amount of days that it would take for a child to catch up on school when they have missed it, what are the levels that are regarded as critical?
Thank you very much for having me. And as you rightly said, after 4 years of conflict in Sudan, what we are seeing is the massive impact that this conflict is having on many of the social sectors, but specifically the education, where, at the onset of the conflict, children, teachers, their families have all been displaced, and majority of the schools across Sudan have been used as a shelter, really causing a lot of damage to school premises, scholastic materials, and where desks and tables, which were used by students for learning, are now being used, all of them, as a firewood. 4 years of conflict in Sudan is really too much time to allow children not to go to school. 500 days is not small. Right now, what we have is 8 million school-age children who are not going to school, and that is pretty much half of the children of Sudan, and half of the schools are also very closed. Schools are not just spaces for learning, but also it is a space for children to feel secure, to be protected. And what we are now seeing after 500 days of conflict in Sudan, children are exposed to all sorts of risk. We have seen children who have, small children who have been damaged or who have lost body parts due to unexploded ordnance. We are seeing a rise in the number of children who are now recruited into the armed forces by the different groups, or where girl childs have now been forced to marry early, which is really a big problem. Education remains one of the very few variables that really determine the future success of a country and the success of a human being. And what we are seeing now is Sudan, half of the Sudanese children have been denied their right to learn, to peace, and to play.
Compared to other emergencies that you've seen worldwide, how dire is this education situation in Sudan?
It is really very dire, because the conflict of Sudan did not spare majority of the country. All corners of Sudan have been impacted, and we see the damage to the schools. We see the death and injury this war has brought to students, their families, and teachers. And we have seen the level of displacement, the level of hunger. The entire economic sector has collapsed. It's not only the schools, but also health facilities are closed. People don't have access to clean water. Sometimes you will have a massive cholera outbreak, and majority of those who have been impacted by these outbreaks, like cholera, are children as well. So it's a multifaceted crisis that has happened, but education is really at the center of the destruction. 8 million children who are not going to school is not really a small issue. We have, on our day-to-day interactions, we are talking to children, and they are telling us how they are missing their schools, the familiar environments, the teachers, and they are also very, very traumatized about what they have seen, including lots of family members, the teachers being killed. The displacement itself is really having a severe mental health issue. So we are calling for international community to really try anything in their power to make sure that, first of all, this conflict ends, but also children of Sudan have a future, because otherwise we are talking about the loss of generations and generations of Sudanese children, and children really represent the future of any country, and we are very concerned by what's happening at the moment.
Right. As we speak of those concerns about their future, what does a typical day look like for children who've been out of school for such a long time? How is their future affected? How is their learning affected? And prospects of, even growth? You do mention that some of them end up being recruited into the army as well. And one can imagine that might even be a better option than those who might be recruited in things that are criminal.
Yeah, exactly. So a typical day for a child right now who's not going to school looks like they are not in their homes. They are in displacement camps, where The living conditions are really very horrible. The life is a life which is really full of fear, full of distress, mental health issues. And as I said, because schools also provide a protection for children. So because of the conflict, most of the places are contaminated with unexploded ordnance. So you might have a child playing with those, and we have seen a lot of children who have lost their limbs and arms and other body parts. It is really very, very horrifying. And as I said, this idea becomes people don't have access to the basic services, including food. In some of the schools where Save the Children is operational, we are not only trying to revive education itself, but we are trying to create safe spaces where psychosocial support can be provided to children, and children are also given food to feed, because the level of malnutrition and stunting is very, very severe in Sudan.
During your visits, what are the children saying as you speak to them in terms of their hopes of returning to school? Is that something that they even see as a possibility?
Yeah, so children, when we meet them, they tell us about the days when they would leave home early and walk from their homes to schools where they could play with their friends. Some of them really show us pictures they have drawn of their school environment, some of the names of the teachers, and how they really used to enjoy learning, and they wish that they can go back. Children are very innocent, and sometimes what that means is they don't really have a comprehension of what's happening around them. They really show a lot of hope, a lot of resilience, and that's really what making us as adults very happy, because there is a possibility to do that and to ensure that schools are reconstructed, scholastic materials are provided, and children can really go to school and be protected from the environment, which is really very harsh at the moment.
As you say, the international community is one that you call upon to step in and ramp up efforts on this situation. But what is of most urgent need then that you would call on international community and donors in making sure that these children return to safe schools, not just schools, but safe school environment, whether it's back to the classroom or in a home setup?
Yeah, so we are really very concerned by the latest, funding cuts globally, but also to Sudan. What we are calling is really urgent, flexible funding to come to Sudan, so that schools should be prioritized. We require, as I said earlier, majority of the schools in Sudan have been used as a shelter. Some of them have really come under attack and they have been destroyed. Tables and chairs, which one has been used for equipping children for the future, have been all destroyed or used as a firewood. So really making sure that resources are available, they are flexible, and children can go back to school, teachers can really be paid, food can be provided to children. But also we are calling for the international community to really try and use any leverage they have to really bring this war to an end, because the longer this war continues, the more children who will be exposed to all sorts of danger, and the future of generation of Sudanese will be lost with it.
We hope it never gets to that point. But thank you so much, Mohammed, for your time and insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
God bless for the work you do at Save the Children there as well. Mohammed Abdilatif, Save the Children Country Director in Sudan, highlighting the dire situation happening in the education system of the country, where school children have missed as much as 500 days of school.
Africa at Play with Neto, N-E-T-O, Germany.
Lelita, talk to us about your relationship with your father, Coach Pitso. What is this one thing that he said to you that is still stuck at the top of your head?
Coach Pitso and our mom, Moira Kakale, have always told us that whatever we do in life, we must do it to the best of our abilities, that, represent our family well. But the big thing is do what you love and do it with all the passion that you have. And I think we see it in both their work. I mean, my mom has done a really good job with placing Coach Pitso in different clubs around the world, and she's negotiated contracts, and she's showing that as a woman you can also do work that is seen, and you can also get men in a male male-dominated space. And I think my dad has also shown that, you must never underestimate the Black African man.
Lelintle Musimane, a South African communications and digital media professional. Lelintle is also a daughter to a great mentor when it comes to the game of football, Coach Jingles Musimane.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Guinea-Bissau, one of West Africa's smallest countries, has set December the 6th this year for both the presidential and legislative elections. And this is more than a year after a military coup upended its political process. The coup in late November 2025 saw the army seize power just as contested election results were about to be announced, prompting regional concern about the future of democratic rule. Now, the transitional military leaders now say that the conditions are in place for a credible vote, but questions remain about the political space, civil liberties, and regional involvement. Joining us now is Austin Aigbe, who's advocacy officer at the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS, to unpack what this means for Guinea-Bissau and the wider region. Thank you so much indeed, Austin, for joining us, and it's always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning.
All right, let's start with what's happened since November 2025. Some might say that the military setting this election date for December 2026 shows some commitment towards movement back to civilian rule and democratic processes. What's your take on the situation in the country at this time? Has the country become stable, and is there a movement towards democracy again?
Okay, thank you again. Folks who have said that there's a commitment on the side of the military, they could have a point, but my point remains that this was an organized coup. It was a coup by Mbalo himself, and I said it on the radio station earlier. What is happening is because of the pressure from both the ECOWAS and the African Union. However, we've seen those kind of commitment before from military authorities. We saw the same commitment from Mali. We saw it from Niger. Ab initio, we saw it in Burkina Faso. But each of these military authorities, by the time they gain so much ground, they begin to elongate those deadlines. And before you know what's happening, it will be 4 years in Mali as we now have it today. Niger has also moved. So I do not trust military authority to give me a date until it happens. Even the Guinea that had the election on December 28th had to shift the goalpost twice before eventual elections because it saw apparently he has consolidated power enough. He could contest election under using the civilian authority to now move from military to civilian. I mean, that's military strategy right now in West Africa. I do not trust the military authority in Guinea-Bissau, and I will not go with that kind of commentary because civilian authorities, military authority in Guinea-Bissau may want to shift and become civilian authority the same way we have seen it now in Guinea.
How have they been running things so far? Civil society and opposition figures have faced arrests, displacement or exclusion in recent months, and some have even, key figures have been granted protection abroad. How difficult has the space been for dissenting voices in Guinea-Bissau?
It is just the spillover from what Mbalo started. Mbalo did everything to usurp on dissenting voices, particularly opposition candidate. The main opposition, if you recall, was suspended from participating in that election until the main opposition had to rally around another opposition who now won the election as we now know it today. Even with the comment from former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, it was clear that the opposition has won with 63% ahead just to announce the result when the coup happened. So it continues. The main opposition candidate who had won, is taking refuge in the Nigerian embassy in Guinea-Bissau, and a lot of other strong opposition have fled the country. It continued, and that's what the military want to do. They will try as much as possible to create an environment where opposition is grounded, and then it become in no opposition at all. We've seen that, of course, even in civilian authority country like in Cote d'Ivoire. We've seen that replicated in the Guinea, and then Bissau is just learning the rope and learning the playbook.
So ECOWAS has condemned the coup, of course, as they would. But I wonder if that is enough and if the regional body can actually do anything, because we've seen that Niger and Burkina Faso have shown that they can stand up in the face of anything that ECOWAS might bring to the table.
So, but it may be very difficult for Bissau. Bissau is a small, poor country in West Africa. It doesn't have the kind of capacity to organize like these three countries. If it was left alone with Burkina Faso, it may never have happened. Burkina Faso would have been challenged alone. If it was left alone with Niger, it could have been a major challenge. But three countries, landlocked countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, would organize and try to organize their power together, organize their resources together. But Bissau does not have that connection with this country. It may be very difficult for them to organize alone. But like you said, yes, they're counting on these three countries. If they could live alone and they could say no to ECOWAS, it is possible for Guinea-Bissau to do the same. However, why it may be very difficult is because as of today, okay, maybe just to answer your question directly, it is not enough. ECOWAS has not done enough. I would personally, even though I don't have so much power, I would expect the same thing that ECOWAS, of course, through the Nigerian government, even though people argue it was the President Talon who requested that invasion.
All right, it looks like we've lost Austin, but I think that he had shared his thoughts with us very well indeed about Guinea-Bissau's situation. That was Austin Aigbe, Advocacy Officer at the West African Democracy Solidarity Network. It's 7:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Chwalani Tulongwebe.
SABC News headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the African Union has said it's ending its suspension of Guinea, imposed since a military coup in 2021. It follows a return to constitutional rule under an elected president. Leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malema, will be back in the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape province today for pre-sentencing proceedings. This follows his conviction for discharging a firearm during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebrations at the Sisa Dukashe Stadium in Mdantsane in 2018. And finally, the US Vice President J.D. Vance has denied that a 5-year-old boy was arrested by federal immigration officers in Minnesota. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News headlines. The African Perspective.
Fikile Lingwade is standing by with your sports update. We say good morning to him now.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
We kick off with football news. Mamelodi Sundowns veteran keeper Dennis Onyango is convinced the current crop of players can guide the Sundowns side to a first CAF Champions League title in a decade. Onyango is one of the 3 surviving players from the team that won the coveted trophy under the coach Pitso Mosimane. Onyango was the number 1 keeper when Sundowns won the Champions League back in 2016. Onyango, midfielder Themba Zwane, and utility player Thapelo Morena are the only surviving players from the class of 2016.
I think the boys, they all know what to do. Last season we were very close to winning the Champions League. I believe that this season we can do it because we've moved closer. We've been knocked out a couple of times in the quarterfinals, in the semi-finals. We lost in the finals, so we were getting there. And the boys know that the task ahead is very difficult, but we just need to keep fighting.
Sundowns have enough African interclub experience. They have made the knockout stage in 8 of the last 9 CAF Champions League seasons. They reached the final last season, losing to Egyptian club Pyramids FC in the final. Coach Miguel Cardoso says they will again take it one game at a time this season.
The expectation is that we make the best out of this group stage, and then we have to travel probably more far away. And traveling more far away means that we have gone through the group stage, that we'll play the quarterfinal. Let's hope we have another trip and that it takes us also far, so it means we have to play a first semi-final. Look, ambition on this club is to play every match to win.
On to cricket news, South Africa suffered a 55-run defeat to the West Indies in their final Under-19 World Cup group match in Windhoek. Opener Zachary Carter smashed a dazzling 114 from 104 balls to set up a total of 233 before left-arm quick JJ Basson led a spirited fight back with figures of 5 for 23. But the junior Proteas faltered in reply, dismissed for 179 in 37.4 overs. Fast bowler Shaquan Bell claimed 6 wickets, while spinner Vitel Lowe's produced a superb delivery to remove in-form Jason Rowles for 46. South Africa's batting woes were compounded by poor shot selection and another run out, their 6th in 3 games. On to athletics. Kenya's ex-marathon record holder Bridget Kosgei says she and 4 other Kenyans will compete for Turkey at the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Kosgei, a silver medalist at the Tokyo Olympics, says fellow runner Ronald Kwemoi, a silver medalist at the Paris Games, will also switch to Turkey along with 3 others. And finally, with tennis news, tennis greats Martina Navratilova and Lindsay Davenport took Naomi Osaka to task, saying she had failed to keep to basic etiquette after her Australian Open flashpoint. The Japanese star's second-round win against Sorana Cestia was marred by a testy exchange and icy handshake at the end. Veteran Cestia, in her 18th and last visit to Melbourne Park before retiring, took issue with Osaka shouting "come on" between the Romanian's first and second serves. During an on-court interview, 2-time Australian Open winner Osaka was dismissive of Cestia but later apologized for being disrespectful. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Right, it's now time to catch you up. In fact, coming up shortly is going to be the world of business, and we're going to be hearing more from Nosipho Zuma. But just before that, because I love taking you back in time, a short while ago we spoke about Guinea-Bissau heading towards the elections in December the 6th. Well, I'm going to take you to Guinea-Bissau back to 1963 now, and this is where the Guinea-Bissau War of Independence actually began. We saw that fighters from the African Party for Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, led by Amilcar Cabral, launched an attack on the Portuguese garrison of Taite. The event marked the formal beginning of an 11-year armed struggle that eventually led to the independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, contributing significantly to the collapse of the Portuguese colonial empire. So much has happened since 1963, a military coup in 2025, and maybe a return to civilian rule in December 2026. Coming up, the business news. Stay with us.
Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
assuring sustainable water availability for every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Okay, let's find out what's happening in the world of business. And standing by with your bulletin is Nosipo Zuma. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the World Economic Forum will resume hosting its Africa Summit in South Africa next year in April, now this after a 7-year-long absence. This was confirmed by the Tourism Minister, Patricia de Lille, in Davos, Switzerland. Briefing the media following South Africa's participation in the forum this week, de Lille says the event will further bolster the tourism sector that already contributes 8.8% to South Africa's GDP and supports 1.8 million jobs.
Let me start by thanking the World Economic Forum for selecting South Africa to host the Spring Davos in 2027. We are ready, able and willing, and we look forward to us having been afforded this opportunity to host Davos Spring. South Africa is the leading business destination, business event destination in the continent and in the Middle East. Business events and tourism adds about 8.8% to the GDP of South Africa.
Negotiations are back on the table for South Africa's steel giant. Now, after a tense standoff last year, ArcelorMittal South Africa and the Industrial Development Corporation have officially resumed talks regarding a potential state-led buyout. Discussions hit a wall last year after AMSA rejected a $520 million offer, citing disagreements over valuation and strategic positioning. SABC News understands that several companies have now expressed interest in supporting the IDC's acquisition to provide the financial support needed to bridge the previous valuation gap. Tsepo Budibe is the Industrial Development Corporation spokesperson.
The Industrial Development Corporation has taken note of ArcelorMittal's latest further cautionary announcement. It affirms that the IDC remains in ongoing discussion with the company, the ArcelorMittal Group, government partners including the DTIC, to find a lasting solution to the steelmakers' current difficulties and protect South Africa's vital steel manufacturing capability.
Wholesale trade sales fell by 0.8% in November compared with a year ago. This latest data released by Stats SA points to weaker underlying demand in South Africa's wholesale trade sector. Wholesale trade sales reflect goods purchased in large quantities from manufacturers or producers. However, on a month-on-month basis, seasonally, adjusted sales rebounded, rising by 2% in November from October. SABC News economics reporter Nosipo Khadebe has more.
That follows modest growth in October and a contraction in September. Over the 3 months to November, wholesale trade sales increased by 0.5% compared with the previous 3-month period. In nominal terms, sales grew by 1.2% year-on-year in November, driven mainly by dealers in solid, liquid and gaseous fuels, which rose 5% and made the largest contribution to growth. For the 3 months ended November, wholesale trade sales were up 1% compared with the same period last year, supported largely by stronger sales of machinery, equipment and supplies. Nosipo Khadebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Egyptian Finance Minister Ahmed Kauchouk says that overall private investment in Egypt grew by 73% last year. He was speaking during a session at the World Economic Forum in Davos as the government pushes to boost private sector participation and attract investment. And finally, oil prices have rebounded today after U.S. President Donald Trump renewed threats against major Middle Eastern producer Iran, raising concerns of military action that could disrupt supplies. Now, Brent crude futures for March rose 35 U.S. cents to $64.41 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose 33 cents to $59.69 a barrel. Both contracts slumped about 2% 2% today and rebounded after Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that the U.S. has an armada heading toward Iran, but hoped he would not have to use it. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 420, and Botswana is 13.20. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 29, and in Zambia it's 19.97. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rupee 307. Russia is 72 rubles 22. India is 91 rupees 58. China at 6 yuan 97, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 16 rand 20. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,959 and platinum at $2,674 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.48 a barrel. Now, for any stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosi Posoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Coming up, we go abroad as well as the World Economic Forum there. News of US President Donald Trump having unveiled a new board of peace at that World Economic Forum in Davos, and this saying that it will take on a wider role in resolving international conflicts. We'll speak about that story, getting a report from Sherwin Bryce Peace first, and then getting analysis.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Bina l'export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The framework deal on Greenland agreed with US President Donald Trump would require NATO allies to step up on Arctic security. That's the position of NATO Secretary General after the new framework on a future deal was announced by Trump late Wednesday, who also backtracked on threats to impose fresh tariffs of European countries that opposed his advances on Greenland. Trump also used his visit to Davos, Switzerland, to launch his Board of Peace, which was initially set up to undergird Gaza's ceasefire to redevelopment, but appeared to now be framed as a tool to resolve international conflicts, which could position it as a potential rival to the United Nations, particularly the Security Council. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
After pressure from European allies, President Trump backtracked on both military threats to take over Greenland and imposing punitive tariffs on countries that opposed his efforts to take control of the island nation. Mark Rutte is NATO's Secretary General.
We came to this understanding that collectively as NATO we have to step up here, including the US. Now, of course, our military will start the planning, but that is something which we are good at. I mean, NATO for 76 years has done this stuff. We have Baltic Sentry, we have Eastern Sentry, we have so many other missions and activities that will be done. And as soon as that is finalized, we will have to look where you have to take the decision. Is it in the North Atlantic Council? Is it at the level of the commanders? We'll see. But the most important thing is not the internal decision making. It is that we protect the Arctic region, implementing the President's vision that we need a safe Arctic region.
This is how President Trump framed the new agreement with NATO when asked by a reporter if he still wanted the United States to have ownership.
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position. especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen indicated that they were open to further talks, but would not engage in negotiations on their sovereignty, and that only Denmark and Greenland would make decisions about their future.
Den danske og den grønlandske position er den samme.
The Danish and Greenlandic positions are the same, and there has been no negotiation with NATO yesterday about our sovereignty. Of course, there hasn't. That is a matter for us alone, and we do not intend to abandon the very basic principles of democracy and politics. Now we are continuing to engage in dialogue with the Americans about security. We also have a common interest in ensuring that there is no Chinese or Russian investment, neither, in my view, in the United States or in Europe. So, in fact, there are many common points and a common interest in ensuring our security.
Trump also used his time in Davos to launch his new Board of Peace for Gaza, amid concerns in some quarters that the initiative is now being expanded beyond its original remit.
We're committed to ensuring Gaza is demilitarized, properly governed, and beautifully rebuilt. It's going to be a great plan, and that's where the Board of Peace really started. And I think we can spread out to other things as we succeed with Gaza. We're going to be very successful in Gaza. It's going to be a great thing to watch, and we can do other things. We can do numerous other things. Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do, and we'll do it in conjunction with the United Nations. You know, I've always said the United Nations has got tremendous potential, has not used it.
The UN weighed in on the board earlier this week through the Secretary General's deputy spokesperson Farhan Haq.
The Board of Peace has been authorized by the Security Council for its work on Gaza, strictly for that. We're not talking about the wider operations or any of the aspects that have been in the media for the last several days. What we're talking about is the work on Gaza. The larger aspects are things for anyone wanting to participate in this grouping to consider. Obviously, the UN has its own charter, its own rules, and you can do your own compare and contrast between the respective organizations.
The list of members so far includes the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Belarus, Indonesia, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, among others. South Africa's presidency earlier indicated that it had not been invited to join, but Director General in the Department of International Relations, Zane Dangor, posted on X that being supportive of a reformed and effective multilateral system with the United Nations at its core was incongruent with being part of a private board of peace constituted by unaccountable billionaires, and where the agenda was to replace and destroy the UN with a colonial-style mandate. I'm Sherwin Bryce Pease in New York.
So from that report from Sherwin Bryce Pease on U.S. President Donald Trump's unveiling of a new Board of Peace at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, a body that he says could move beyond the Gaza ceasefire and take on a wider role in resolving international conflicts, even as questions grow about whether it could challenge the authority of the United Nations. We now get a Pan-African perspective on what this means for global diplomacy and Africa's voice in a changing world order. We're joined by Professor Gilbert Kadiagala, who is Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of the Witwatersrand here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Professor, welcome to Channel Africa. Good morning.
Good morning.
President Trump has announced this Board of Peace at Davos, Switzerland, suggesting it could take on a global role and even replace the United Nations or the functions thereof. From your perspective, how credible is this initiative, and does he have the power to replace some of the functions of the UN?
This board has been controversial because of that objective of attempting to replace the United Nations. I think Trump has suggested that it may work with the United Nations, but it's not very clear at this point whether in fact that objective will be fulfilled or whether the board is going to take over the roles of the UN or the Security Council. So that is the biggest contention here. And my belief is that if you look at, in fact, the membership, the current membership of that board, only 2 African countries have been invited. That is Egypt and Morocco. And you can see from those 2 countries that these are not actually representative of what you call the continent of Africa. So it's already problematic for a board that is going to work on peace and conflict issues. And these peace and conflict issues often affect African countries. So how is this board going to operate without a meaningful representation of African countries? And the other point that I want to make is that it is not very clear whether Mr. Trump is going to step down when he leaves the presidency, because the charter of the board gives him a mandate to govern forever as the chair of this board. And I think that is making most countries very nervous. How is that role going to conflict with the goals of the United States as a government once Mr. Trump leaves office? So these are the third issue is, of course, the funding. Some members are supposed to contribute $1 billion, and there will be permanent members of this board. And if you can't afford the $1 billion, then you stay on the board for 3 years and get out. And that is a very problematic component of an organization that is supposed to deal with global issues, that is supposed to be legitimate, that is supposed to work with the rest of international institutions such as the UN. And that's why everybody is nervous. Even the Europeans are nervous. But I think we in Africa should even be more nervous, because this is now a new institution that may not likely have the interests of the continents at heart.
With those who are nervous, as a tool of resolving international conflict, this Board of Peace, could it be seen as a competitor to the United Nations, and or could it both coexist with the UN and peacefully be a Board of Peace while the UN also continues with its functions?
The positive side to the board would be to supplement existing international instruments, such as the United Nations, such as the G7, the G20, and these other multilateral institutions, even the African Union, if we could put it that way. So that would not be a problem, because it's going to help in probably mobilizing resources for some of these conflicts. The worry, and this is the negative component, is that if you have a new institution of this nature, particularly an institution that is created by the United States, a United States that is withdrawing or pulling away from most of its obligations at the UN, what you're going to end up with is an institution that essentially competes with the UN. And it competes with the UN in very unfavorable terms, because if the United States is stopping to pay its membership dues or contributions to major functions of the UN in terms of peace, in terms of stability, in terms of governance, then it will be very difficult for the UN to operate. So that is the argument for the potential for this institution to essentially supplant the UN and not really work with the UN, deprive the UN of the resources it needs. So this is really the danger that everybody is worried about. But if it is going to help the UN, well and good, because the more resources we have globally for some of these big issues on peace and security, I think the better. But it's too early now to tell whether the Board of Peace is going to supplement or to supplant the United Nations. And I think these are the worries. And then, of course, membership. Who is going to sit at the table? Africa has been demanding for representation in the UN Security Council. And now we have a new institution that barely talks about Africa. We have a new institution that simply ignores Africa. This is a problem for the board going forward. Maybe Trump may change his mind and invite countries such as South Africa down the road, but currently it doesn't look like there will be a meaningful African representation on that board.
On that point then of membership, 59 countries have reportedly joined this Board of Peace, mostly from the Middle East and some democracies. And then on the African continent, as you mentioned, only 2 form part, Egypt and Morocco. So how should Africa view this? And should they want to be involved then in terms of changing that representation? Or should they just see this as a symbolic thing?
I think Africa is going to look at the board as pretty much a symbolic thing. Egypt is important only because of the objective of Gaza. Egypt is a neighbor to Gaza, so I can see why they will be invited. But I think remaining silent on the rest of the continent, I think that is a bigger problem. And it's very clear that there is not going to be any African representation beyond those 2 countries. If we go by what happened yesterday, because that's when the board was unveiled. But yesterday you only had 20 countries coming on board. So presumably there will be more countries being invited, or the 59 probably would then, some countries, even the Pope has been invited to be a member of the board. So we'll see whether in the coming days, whether there will be more countries joining the board. And then we can then start to really worry about Africa, because if there's no African invitation, let's say a year from today, then it deepens, in fact, the perspective that this is an organization that doesn't care about Africa, and therefore it is not going to be as effective in dealing with African conflicts as the United Nations has been doing over the years.
Professor, thank you so much for your valuable insights and your time, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thank you. Professor Gilbert Kadiagala is Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of the Witwatersrand. It's based here in South Africa, talking to us about U.S. President Donald Trump saying we need a board of peace that goes beyond what it was originally formed for, which was the Gaza ceasefire, as the UN Security Council had said it can go ahead on that, and only that. He says let's expand it now and deal with other international conflicts as what the mandates of the UN would be. We'll see how Africa places itself on that one. 8 o'clock Central African time, and we get our news update. We enter also the 3rd hour of Rise and Shine. Here's Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The African Union has said it's ending its suspension of Guinea imposed since a military coup in 2021. It follows a return to constitutional rule under an elected president. Tabiso Lehoko has the story.
The African Union's Peace and Security Council said it was inviting Guinea to immediately resume its participation in AU activities. The council commended Guinea's adoption of a new constitution and December's presidential election won by the coup leader, General Mamadi Doumbouya. The former president of Conde and the long-time opposition leader Selou Dalein Diallo were both barred from running. Some opposition parties and civil society groups called the vote a sham. Since 2020, Guinea was one of the 5 West African countries in which the military seized power.
Leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malema, will be back in the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape Province today for pre-sentencing proceedings. This follows his conviction for discharging a firearm during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebrations at the Sisa Tukashe Stadium in Mdantsane in 2018. Malema was charged for the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging a firearm and reckless endangerment. Lobby group AfriForum's Jacques Broedryk says he'll be surprised if the court does not slap Malema with a jail term.
It's very important to remember that these charges that Mr. Malema was found guilty on are actually very serious charges. If we look at just one example, for instance, the illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition, there have been cases where people have been sentenced to up to 15 years imprisonment for that. So it's very serious charges. Of course, there might be mitigating conditions and circumstances that the judge takes into consideration, but I would be very surprised and I would be very skeptical of the process if we at least didn't see a few years prison time for Mr. Malema.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is following the post-election situation in Uganda with concern. That's according to a statement released by his spokesperson. Reports from the country indicate that police in Uganda have detained a key opposition lawmaker linked to presidential contender and opposition leader Bobi Wine. Uganda's 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni won re-election on Saturday, extending his 40-year rule despite claims of vote rigging from the opposition. The SG spokesperson Stephen Dujarric.
The Secretary-General is following with concern the post-election situation in Uganda, including reports of arrests, detentions, and violent incidents involving opposition figures and supporters. He notes the importance of restraint by all actors and respect for the rule of law and Uganda's international human rights obligations. That includes the right of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. The Secretary-General stresses the importance of due process and humane treatment for all those in custody and underscores the need to safeguard civic space.
The Emergency Consultative Group has urged the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention to lift the status of Mpox public health emergency based on the sustained decline in cases. However, the Director General of the Africa CDC, Jean Kaseya, says the endemic transition of Mpox persists in high-burdened countries and requires sustained vigilance. Kaseya was addressing members of the media on a number of health issues besetting the continent.
Lifting the status of public health emergency of health security doesn't mean that Mpox is eliminated. No. It means we are considering Mpox as a disease we need to control, we need to continue to assess. And we are moving to the next phase with what we call the Mpox transition roadmap. And this control toward the elimination that will help this continent to start to deal with all other issues that will emerge.
And finally, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has denied that a 5-year-old boy was arrested by federal immigration officers in Minnesota. Local officials claim that the boy was detained by ICE officers on Tuesday. Vance described the boy's father as an illegal alien who had run away from ICE officers after they tried to arrest him, and he said they couldn't let the child freeze to death. The BBC's Helena Humphreys has the story.
The Vice President said he was in Minneapolis to try and bring down the temperature as demonstrations continue over ICE enforcement operations and the fatal shooting of a US citizen, Renee Nicole Good, over 2 weeks ago. Mr. Vance said he did not think President Trump would see the need right now to follow through on his threat to invoke the Insurrection Act that would allow troops to be deployed to put down unrest.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Mwepe.
In our sports headline, Mamelodi Sundowns are targeting another Champions League title. Lorenzo Musetti advanced to the Australian Open third round with straight sets victory. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
SABC News. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. From Africa's capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's the final hour of Rise and Shine, the Friday edition. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in and always starting your news day with this program. And we're streaming on channelafrica.co.za. You can also catch us on our social media platforms. Just type in Channel Africa and you're bound to catch us on one of them. And also on your mobile app. Just go into your app store Look for SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and then look for Channel Africa, and then of course Rise and Shine. So my name is Peter Ndoro, and we're driving this show with Asanda Beda. Very good morning and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. A very good morning, everyone. As we enter the third hour of the show, of course, we're looking at Uganda in this hour. That's a story that's been developing from last week into this week. Developments happening there as well, even throughout the rest of this week. One of the stories is the appointment of a new Chief Justice by the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, who has retired at the age of 70. And so we'll be getting analysis in terms of that in international perceptions, in terms of how the rule of law is perceived in Uganda, particularly with this new appointment.
And still with Uganda, what's his name? Mwanga Kivumbi, who's the deputy leader of Bobi Wine's National Unity Platform, the NUP, has been arrested, and he's a close ally, obviously, of the opposition leader, Robert Kyagulanyi. Kyagulanyi himself has gone into hiding. He got tipped off that authorities were coming for him, and President Museveni's son has said that, look, we've killed 22 people already. We hope that Kyagulanyi is the 23rd. So it's a tense time in Uganda at this time, and we'll be unpacking that story.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Right, let's start that feature that we have for this half hour, looking at Uganda post their election that took place last week. And of course, we now see President Yoweri Museveni enjoying and starting a 7th term. Well, Ugandan politician and close ally of opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, commonly known as Bobi Wine, has been arrested. Mwanga Kivumbi, deputy leader of Wine's National Unity Platform, NUP, is accused of organizing attacks on a police station and a voting tallying center after the electoral loss. President Yoweri Museveni was announced the winner of the recent elections, securing a 7th term in office with over 71% of the vote. Now, the opposition in the country has dismissed the vote result, leading to widespread public protests. We're now joined by Robert Kigongo, who's a Ugandan political analyst, social commentator, and writer for leading dailies in Uganda. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Peter, and all the listeners. I'm exceedingly humbled to be hosted by Channel Africa.
So, Robert, what would you say is the dominant mood across Uganda at the moment? One would imagine for many there's a bit of anger, fear, maybe even exhaustion, maybe determination. What sense do you get about what people are feeling and are most worried about at this time?
Peter, on 15th January, Uganda went to the polls, and the people of Uganda voted for their respective presidents. As you all know, the Electoral Commission of Uganda declared Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and immediately we had eruptions and tensions across all major cities of Uganda, partly because the first runner-up declared by the Electoral Commission, Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, regarded the results as fake and fabricated, that they did not reflect the will of the people of Uganda. And there are quite so many Ugandans that voted for him that resonate with his point of view. So they chose to demand for their win. But partly was also the parliamentary seats. The ruling party, the NRM, wanted to take majority of the seats by force without declaring the truly elected legislators. So these legislators were preconditioned to actually mobilize their supporters across the various constituencies to cause some sort of tension so that they could be declared. And whoever did that was declared. One of them was Honorable Joel Senyonyi. The people of Nakawa West demonstrated. That's how it was announced. The people of Machinde West demonstrated. That's how Zahara Ruyurika, an NUP candidate, was declared winner. Those who did not, they were not declared as winners. So that was part of the build-up that led to this kind of atmosphere. And as we talk now, the situation is tense. There is a lot of heavy deployment all over major cities. There is a lot of secret police and secret spies scattered all over major towns, bars, restaurants, just to get feedback of what is likely to happen. And this has also prompted the ruling party to arrest, through the CDF, to arrest the major coordinators and administrators of the National Unity Platform. One of them is Mwanga Chivumbi, that is in spotlight, but we have John Mary Sebofu, one of the overall coordinator of the NUP. He has been arrested. Abibu Wembo was arrested. This is the chief mobilizer of that party. He was arrested before, on the eve of the event. The Western Regional Coordinator for NUP was also arrested. The Northern Coordinator for NUP, Dr. Lina Zedriga, was equally arrested. And they are trying to siege these voices of dissent, but also it's part and parcel of trying to control any possible uprising in Uganda. So the situation is very tense. People have not yet returned back to work for fear of what may happen. Others have decided to stay up country. So, dear South Africans, this is what Uganda is going through, and the rest of Africa.
So you've mentioned quite a bit there, arrests of key figures like Mwanga Chivumbi, and also the threats that were issued by President Museveni's son, who's also the head of the army, literally wishing death upon the NUP leader. So the security forces, the authorities on the one hand are saying these arrests are all about preserving security in the country. The opposition is saying that this is political repression. How are Ugandans interpreting both of these narratives?
One, I always want to remind the rest of Africa, Ugandans are peasants. Majority of the population are peasants. Peasants normally submit to the strong man. So what the regime knows is that once they try to target Bobby Wine specifically, they know other key players, the vocal voices will go mute. And this is the case. We have other competitors like Mugisha Muntu, who was a former CDF, was also contesting in this election. He is mute. We have Nandala Mafab. They have all gone mute. It's only one courageous candidate, Robert Kasibande, that has actually taken on the mantle to actually petition the presidential results. But the target towards Bobby Wine is to silence him and also to make sure that he does not go to court to challenge the election results. That's why he's in hiding. That's why his home is under 24 surveillance with heavily armed security spies all over his place. And that's why he ended up in hiding. God knows where he is, but that is to prevent him. This will go up to May until the president swears in, Yoweri Museveni swears in, taking his style to 45 years in power. So knowing that Bobby Wine is the focal point of dissenting voices. So they are neutralizing that focal point that nothing happens. But Ugandans, being peasants, have surrendered to the strong man, and they have honestly given up. They have left him to God. It's only God who knows.
So, there are fears for Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine's life, and if we consider what's happened to Kizza Besigye over decades, is the same fate waiting for Kyagulanyi if the authorities get hold of him?
He has two options. One is to go to exile, the way Dr. Kizza Besigye went to exile, actually in South Africa, where he was. He escaped through Rwanda, Restina Gomez. Kyagulanyi has the same option. The other option, considering his type of politics, the Mahatma Gandhi politics, the non-violence style of politics, which may not apply in military states, is to cause civil disobedience, to lead civil disobedience, and maybe try to force a regime change through other means, which is literally next to impossible. So his option right now is to actually escape into exile and wait for the situation, for the dust to settle. That's the option he has now, because Ugandans are waiting for his voice. He has told them what they're supposed to do. It's upon them. It's supposed to be organic. Anything to do with the non-civil disobedience of Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther style has to come from the citizens. The citizens
about citizens, I mean, we've seen youth-led political movements gain momentum across several countries. Are Ugandans prepared to do the same, or is the fear of the heavy hand of the authorities too much?
What is happening in Uganda is actually, we are under a dark triad. In a dark triad, you use all tools available to you. The regime has money. It has injected a lot of money, $1 million, into these vulnerable communities, the ghetto structures that made up Bobi Wine. So they have all been compromised. The MPs, the key political players, have been compromised to the M7 regime, who would be mobilizing the communities. Then you have fear. When you have heavy deployment of security, monitoring areas day by day, night by night, hour by hour, it's very hard for citizens to rise up. They are mugged. Their voices are muzzled. You can't have any serious consequential action from that kind of citizenry. There is also a lot of cyber stalking. The internet is very, very unstable. So the WhatsApp is not functioning well. Same applies to other. Recently, mobile money was switched off. For fear, there was an allegation that the Kyagulanyi faction will be distributing money to demonstrators. And also this comes back to the previous election, campaign messages. The president said, it was Bobi Wine that said it first, that Ugandans are more than the security forces, meaning if there is any uprising, they can outnumber the security forces. That led to the response from the CDF and the commander-in-chief, Yoweri Museveni, that a gun has 120 bullets, meaning 120 bullets can take 120 citizens down. So that arithmetic that we went into is also contributing to this situation, calculating the bullets in the gun, calculating the possible number of Ugandans that could go to the streets. So all that is the background that led us here.
All right. Robert, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. But your analysis, really appreciated on the program. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Peter.
That was Robert Kigongo, who's a sustainable development analyst, a social commentator, political analyst, author, and writer for leading dailies in Uganda, giving us his take on the situation in Uganda right now.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi has now accused Rwanda of violating the peace deal. Are you surprised at this latest accusation? This is literally days after a signing, a ceremony, so to speak.
This is not surprising. I mean, if you ask Paul Kagame, he would also say almost the same thing. One should ask a question. The broker of the peace deal, President Trump, what is it that he wants? Why now? And why is this peace deal being signed in the Americas and not in the Great Lakes? Paul Kagame has never respected Tshisekedi, as often say. Tshisekedi must deal with the problems in his country. He has nothing to do with it. So this peace deal, obviously, when it was signed, one just looked at it and said, this will not last.
Kenny Matiba, former journalist.
Africa Update with Lulu Kapu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download, free to connect.
Meanwhile, staying with Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni has appointed Dr. Flavian Zaija as Uganda's Chief Justice, replacing Justice Alphonse Owini-Dolo Chigamoy, who has retired. Museveni was had announced the winner of the recent elections, securing a 7th term in office with over 71% of the vote. The Parliament of Uganda had submitted a list of 3 candidates for Museveni to select from, barely 4 days after the former Chief Justice Chigamoy took mandatory retirement at the age of 70. For more on this, we're joined now by Dr. Charles Sinkala, international relations expert. Dr. Sinkala, always great talking to you. Thanks for making time for us again on this Friday. Dr. Sinkala, are you there? We'll try and get a hold again of Dr. Charles Sinkala, international relations expert, going back to Uganda, but this time around talking about the appointment of the new Chief Justice there.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrel, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki wao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanataka kuhubiria muziki ya zamani za muziki ya wengine ambao ni hivyo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, hiyo unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudilia mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndo wanaanza kazi ya muziki aizalini, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuta kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Bringing you the energy, news and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So, the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, has appointed Dr. Flavia Nzeija as Uganda's Chief Justice, replacing Justice Alphonse Owini-Dolo Chigamoy, who has retired. He took a mandatory retirement at the age of 70, and Parliament in Uganda had submitted a list of 3 candidates for Museveni to select from. Dr. Charles Sinkala joining us now to unpack, who is an international relations expert. Dr. Sinkala, good morning. Thank you for making time.
Good morning to you and good morning to the listeners.
So what or how might the appointment of the new Justice Minister influence international perceptions of the rule of law when it comes to Uganda post-election?
On the positive side, there will be a perception to the renewal.
Right, we're going to see if we can do this conversation or take this conversation on next week because we are out of time for the rest of the programming for Friday. So it would have been great to get analysis there on the appointment of the new Chief Justice in Uganda, Dr. Flavia Nzeija he is, and he replaces 70-year-old retired Justice Alphonse Owini-Dolo Chigamoy, and Museveni was announced the winner of the recent elections in Uganda, securing a 7th term in office. So we'll get analysis on that, or we'll see if we can next week on Monday. In Uganda, though, some members were expressing that they are surprised at this appointment. We don't know whether that means that there wasn't proper commitment with the justice system or the just Judicial Service Commission in the country, because there were reportedly some of them having said they were not even around when that appointment was made. We don't know if that means proper protocol was followed or not, because we know the country has been rigged with a lot of accusations in terms of electoral fraud and silencing dissenting voices. So as far as democracy goes, we're not sure what that means. The African Union having endorsed, though, this Uganda's election and saying it's about priorities on democracy and stability.
Yeah, the Ugandan elections are very topical at the moment. In fact, this week's Channel Africa Conversations features 2 people, one from the NUP party, a representative here in South Africa, and also an analyst in Uganda, and they break it down for us pretty well. So that's something to look out for, the Channel Africa Conversations podcast.
Right, and 8:30 Central African time it is now. Let's get our news headlines with Jwalane Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The African Union has said it's ending its suspension of Guinea imposed since a military coup in 2021. It follows a return to constitutional rule under an elected president. Legal analyst in South Africa, Mpumelelo Zigalala, says it is highly unlikely that EFF leader Julius Malema will get a custodial sentence and possibly even get a suspended one. This as Malema is scheduled to attend pre-sentencing proceedings at the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape Province today, and the US has officially left the World Health Organization. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
It's time for your sport. At the sports desk this morning is Figile Lingwati. And on a Friday, there's so much to kind of look forward to in terms of anticipation of sports at the weekend. Let's find out from Figile Lingwati.
Sports. on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
First up, it's football news. Mamelodi Sundowns veteran keeper Dennis Onyango is convinced the current crop of players can guide the Brazilians, as Sundowns is affectionately known to a first CAF Champions League title in a decade. Onyango is one of the 3 surviving players from the team that won the coveted trophy under the then coach Peter Musimani. Onyango was the number 1 keeper when Sundowns won the Champions League back in 2016. The midfielder Themba Zwane and utility player Thapelo Morena with Onyango are the only surviving players from the class of 2016.
I think the boys, they all know what to do. Last season we were very close to winning the Champions League. I believe that this season we can do it because we've moved closer. We've been knocked out a couple of times in the quarterfinals, in the semi-finals. We lost in the finals, so we were getting there. And the boys know that the task ahead is very difficult. But we just need to keep fighting.
Sundowns have enough African inter-club experience. They have made the knockout stage in 8 of the last 9 CAF Champions League seasons. They reached the final last season, losing to Egyptian club Pyramids FC in the final. Coach Miguel Cardoso says they will again take it one game at a time this season.
The expectation is that we make the best out of this group stage, and then we have to travel probably more far away. And traveling more far away means that we have gone through the group stage, that we'll play the quarterfinal. Let's hope we have another trip and that it takes us also far, so it means we have to play a first semi-final. Look, ambition on this club is to play every match to win.
And Senegal coach Pape Bona Thiaw says his decision to order a walk-off in Sunday's Africa Cup of Nations final was driven by emotion and a sense of injustice. In an Instagram post, Thiaw apologized if his actions offended anyone, insisting he was trying to protect his players after a late penalty was awarded to host Morocco. Senegal returned to finish the match, eventually winning 1-0 in extra time to claim their second title in 3 editions. The coach paid tribute to his squad of 28 warriors, who have been rewarded with bonuses and land following their triumph. CAF's disciplinary committee is expected to decide in the coming days whether Senegal will face sanctions. On to cricket news. South Africa suffered a 55-run defeat to the West Indies in their final Under-19 World Cup group match in Windhoek. Opener Zachary Carter smashed a dazzling 114 from 104 balls to set a total of 233 before left-arm quick JJ Basson led a spirited fight back with figures of 5 for 23. But the junior Proteas faltered in reply, dismissed for 179 in 37.4 overs. Let's end with tennis news. Italy's Lorenzo Musetti advanced to the Australian Open third round with a straight sets win over compatriot and close friend Lorenzo Sonego. 8-seed Ben Shelton and semi-finalists last year also progressed, easing past Australian qualifier Dane Sweeney 6-3, 6-2 and 6-4. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Right, coming up, we'll check you in with what's happened in the world of lifestyle, arts and the likes as we get into our Friday's edition of the Arty Beat. That's brought to us by Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu. Also, entertainment and music news comes with that. We'll see what she has in store today.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
Assuring sustainable water availability for every home, every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's get the stories that matter from the world of business now. Here is Nosipho Zuma to get us updated.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the World Economic Forum will resume hosting its Africa Summit in South Africa next year in April, this after a 7-year-long absence. This was confirmed by the Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille in Davos, Switzerland. Briefing the media following South Africa's participation in the forum this week, de Lille says the event will further bolster the tourism sector that already contributes 8.8% to South Africa's GDP and supports 1.8 million jobs.
Let me start by thanking the World Economic Forum for selecting South Africa to host the Spring Davos in 2027. We are ready, able and willing, and we look forward to us having been afforded this opportunity to host Davos Spring. South Africa is the leading business event destination in the continent and in the Middle East. Business events and tourism adds about 8.8% to the GDP of South Africa.
Negotiations are back on the table for South Africa's steel giant. Now, after a tense standoff last year, ArcelorMittal South Africa and the Industrial Development Corporation have officially resumed talks regarding a potential state-led buyout. Now, discussions hit a wall last year after AMSA rejected a $520 million offer, citing disagreements over valuation and strategic positioning. SABC News understands that several companies have now expressed interest in supporting the IDC's acquisition to provide the financial support needed to bridge the previous valuation gap. Tsepo Budip is the Industrial Development Corporation spokesperson.
The Industrial Development Corporation has taken note of ArcelorMittal's latest further cautionary announcement. It affirms that the IDC remains in ongoing discussion with the company, the ArcelorMittal Group, government partners including the DTIC, to find a lasting solution to the steelmakers' current difficulties and protect South Africa's vital steel manufacturing capability.
Egyptian Finance Minister Ahmed Kauchouk says that overall private investment in Egypt grew by 73% last year. He was speaking during a session at the World Economic Forum in Davos as the government pushes to boost private sector participation and attract investment. Oil prices have rebounded today after U.S. President Donald Trump renewed threats against major Middle Eastern producer Iran, raising concerns of military action that could disrupt supplies. Brent crude futures for March rose 35 U.S. cents to $64.41 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose 33 cents to $59.69 a barrel. Now, both contracts slumped about 2% today and rebounded after Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that the U.S. has an armada heading toward Iran, but hoped he would not have to use it. Finally, TikTok has completed a $14 billion deal establishing a separate U.S. subsidiary of the video platform to avoid a ban. The joint venture, approved by the U.S. and China, is owned by a majority of American investors. The BBC's Lila Jamali has more details.
The Trump administration was closely involved in brokering the agreement, which leaves TikTok's American operations in the hands of cloud computing giant Oracle and other investors. Oracle is chaired by close Trump ally Larry Ellison and will be in charge of retraining TikTok's powerful algorithm, which serves up content to 200 million American users. TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance will retain a stake just shy of 20%. An Emirati investment fund is also among investors in the new joint venture, which keeps TikTok online in the U.S.
Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 420, and Botswana is 13 pula 20. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 29, and in Zambia it's 19 kwacha 97. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 ruble 307. Russia is 72 rubles 22. India, it's 91 rupees 58. China is 6 yuan 97, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 16 rand 20. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,959 and platinum at $2,674 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.48 a barrel. Now, for any stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. 60 years of Channel Africa. Your trusted voice. Your African perspective. Into the future.
Right, it's time now to find out what's been happening in this past week in the terms of the world of arts and culture. And nobody does it better than Nhlanhla Mahlangu with her program Arty Beats.
Welcome to this week's African RT Beats exclusive to Channel Africa, The African Perspective. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu. In this week's segment, South Africa's Miyagi Symphony celebrates 20 years and Sudan's National Theatre reopens in Khartoum after rehabilitation. The Miyagi Orchestra, a South African orchestra, is this year marking 20 years. Founded to create access to classical and orchestral music for young South Africans who would otherwise be excluded from these spaces, Miyagi has become one of the country's most successful cultural export stories. Founder Robert Brooks has more on how he formed the ensemble.
I was raised in a musical house. My mother was Irish, and her instruments were piano and violin mainly, and she had music-making brothers, and I grew up in that environment, not necessarily opera. But as a kid, I was discovered as a kid with a voice and always sang. And then in 1978, I had the opportunity to go to Salzburg in Austria and study singing. And then from there, it was my profession. And I came back to South Africa for a longer visit in 2000. And I always had the idea to start a project that can, through music, unite people in South Africa. So we started a intercultural festival, but very soon I saw that there was a need for music education and for youngsters to be active in music and to use the power that music training withhold in itself to develop people's brains in a very unique way.
The orchestra is this year marking 20 years. How would you describe the last 20 years and how are you marking this milestone?
This Miyagi Orchestra itself, 20 years. And the Miyagi Orchestra has been on European tour for 7 times since 2009. This year, we will have more presence in the press to tell about Miyagi, the Miyagi story, individual stories, the story of the organization, the story of the people around it, how the population of South Africa appreciates it and how it can assist and help. So we are invited as a result of our numerous tours and the success of those to do a concert in Frankfurt in a very prominent concert hall called the Old Opera House. That will be on the 27th of April, 2026. And on the 12th of April, we would have been registered as an NGO for 25 years. So this is a big celebration, but we also, around that, planning a homecoming concert, performing with the same orchestra of over 60, the same program. And it will be probably in Johannesburg, but we will still advertise about that. And then smaller events, parties. We have to celebrate the stories of the wonderful youngsters that invested in this movement and also are picking the fruits.
Generally, how have South Africans received orchestra as a music genre?
Classical music has been practiced in the townships, in the cities, everywhere, over many, many years. But it is seen as part of the white culture. It's seen, or shall I say, privileged. But I mean, back in the 40s, back in the 50s, whether you were in Umtata or whether you were in the Joburg surrounding areas, there were key people practicing classical music. I think of the Masote family, Michael and Sheila Masote, and even today their son Kutlwano is a leading man, he's a conductor, and he puts together shows with primarily black people in the orchestra. But that's also our reality today, that from the amount of people that over the years started training on classical instruments and now featuring in orchestras like the Cape Philharmonic, the Mzansi National Orchestra, the Joburg Philharmonic, and the Durban Philharmonic. So there's been a huge shift. And if I just think of the individuals in our orchestra, they teach, they produce, and they do their own thing alongside all the bigger organizations, and that is a beautiful future that should be supported. And this is how we will celebrate our 25 years in finding a bigger support for the entire activities of people practicing classical instruments. And then I do have to add that the nature of the talents are so that they play on classical instruments for classical music, but they play their own music. They are so creative of finding ways of new compositions, including indigenous music, township music, and that on classical instruments. And I find that is the industry that we have to support in, but because looking at the result that we have in the big concert halls, that it's sold out, it's cheered, there is a music that appeals out there, and we need to produce it in South Africa and take it there where it's needed.
Sudan's National Theatre has reopened following rehabilitation work, with senior government officials attending a ceremony in Omdurman. The National Theatre is central to preserving Sudan's collective memory and countering efforts to fragment the country. The rehabilitation project is among the key initiatives implemented by the state government in cooperation with the federal ministry, supported by partnerships and volunteer efforts under the auspices of the state police, the intelligence service, and the Theatre Revival Group. Authorities have described the reopening of the theatre as a reflection of Sudanese national identity and cultural heritage in the arts and theatre. Sudan, known for decades of violent conflicts and brutal counterinsurgency campaign in Darfur, has a long history of theatre that ranges from ancient folk drama to contemporary plays that delve into politics and comedy, amongst others. Sudanese theatre enjoyed its golden period in the 1960s and 1970s before floundering during years of economic hardship and civil war. That's it from this week's African RT Beats. Until next Friday for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
The Rise and Shine is on the move here on Channel Africa. Let's find out what's in store for this Friday's edition. Good morning, Palesa.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
Fridays are always good days.
Of course.
And I always look forward to what you're wearing and your outfits because
Oh.
Fridays, we know, Palisa means business.
Is that okay with the Mrs. Ndoro listening there? I'm just warning.
My babu.
All right. Today, obviously, we look into the creative world, and we're going to start off in the world of film, speaking about a documentary film titled From Vision to Screen, which is a 48-minute documentary by South African filmmaker and producer Nonhlanhla Mnisi, who actually takes a look at the process of creating a documentary with filmmakers across South Africa and Zambia. And we'll be speaking to her in the first hour of the show, speaking about, I guess, what happens behind the scenes of African storytelling. And then we move on to music, also still looking at the landscape of the continent. You know, we all have our own little award ceremonies as our own countries, celebrating our own music. But there are award ceremonies that look at the continent at large, but they're not getting as much engagement from the continent. And we're going to be looking into that, speaking about how we can elevate Pan-African cultural engagement. We'll be speaking to artist and writer Percy Mabandu.
I love documentaries. That's literally all I watch.
Really?
I don't follow series, but I will love a documentary.
And
I don't
what's your
care what
favorite
it's about.
genre?
I don't even care.
You don't care?
But most of the time it's crime.
Crime. I knew it was going to be crime. I knew it.
Oh, it's nature.
Okay.
Inspired
For
documentaries.
me, it's history. I love history documentary. Yeah. And you?
There's,
I do like some crime, which
my
Oh
is
goodness.
great, and nature as well. So I think I'm there with Asanda on this one.
So is there such a thing as a perfect crime?
No.
They always make mistakes, don't they? There's always something
there's always
that's
going to be a mistake.
That's on the move coming up.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrel, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Podcast, Channel Africa podcast, actually. Coming up, the new episode has been loaded. So, Peter, who did you speak to this week?
It was Uganda again, and this was post-elections. We did one before the election, but this one was after. And I spoke to two people, Godwin Toko, who's a lawyer and activist in the country, human rights activist, and Richard Kamya, who's the coordinator for Bobi Wine's party here in South Africa. And I had a fascinating conversation with them. And let's listen to what they told me.
All right.
Months before the campaign started, several of people close to Robert Chagulanyi, including his bodyguard called Eddie Mutwe, including a lady that runs their leadership school called Doreen Kaija, were all abducted and disappeared and then later produced in court. In the case of Eddie Mutwe, he disappeared for I think about 4 days. And there was this question of where is he? And then Bob Wine made a tweet, and then the first son, who is the army commander, responded and said, he's in my basement learning Lunyankore. Lunyankore is a local dialect in Uganda, which is spoken by people from the West, like Museveni and his family, and Eddie Mutwe is a Muganda. So there's that ethnic connotation there as well. So there was those several abductions. Then as the campaign started, initially they started from a point of peace being more free. Bobi Wine could move about freely for the first maybe month or so. And then as he got closer to Kampala and the area where his base is in Buganda, central region, things heated up. There was police stopping him all the time. There were people beating him all the time. There was a nasty incident in Gulu where his people were clobbered by soldiers that drew condemnation from far and wide, even outside Uganda. People saw those videos, thought it was just uncalled for and very, very barbaric.
You've had the chief of the defense forces, the son of the president, tweeting, giving him 48 hours. to say, I need to have you within the 48 hours. So we don't know what to expect, because the last time they've done the same thing to the previous opposition leader, who is Colonel Dr. Chiza Westje, they've kept him in jail for so long. They've kept him in jail, in an army jail, despite the fact that the courts have ruled that you cannot try a civilian in an army court. He stayed there up to the present day. It's close to a year now. He's been inside jail after being extradited from Kenya without following any due process, straight to an army cell up to today. We don't know what to expect from our leader. It's a very, very sad day for democracy, that you have a presidential candidate who contests because democracy allows, because the Constitution allows, and him participating in an election becomes a crime. It's really, really, really sad.
I know it's been all things Uganda, so one would wonder if there's even any more to speak about, but there was more that you spoke about on this chat.
I mean, I asked them in particular whether this was a key moment in time. And Godwin said, look, essentially, what's different is that Museveni is old, on the one hand, and on the other, there is a bulging youth in Uganda. So you've got very young people and one person who's old, and that this actually is setting them on a course of collision. And then I asked, could Bobby Wine have won this? And Goodwin Toko says, this thing was so rigged, so manipulated, that Yoweri Museveni wouldn't have beaten Yoweri Museveni in this particular election. So they shared some really fascinating thoughts. But Richard Kamya, who's the coordinator for the United National Unity Party, that's Bobby Wine's party here in South Africa, he said that things are going to happen now. He said that people are fed up, they are tired. Even in the rural areas, there's a sense of just they've given up on this party of the NRM of President Museveni, and they want something new. So they, I think, are now starting to think about doing what they saw maybe in places like Tanzania and Kenya, taking to the streets and taking their country back. They said that what's happening right now under Museveni's government is just unsustainable. Enough is enough, he said. And they don't know where exactly Chagulani is. But
we hope he's safe wherever he is. And at some point, I know he made a video message, but we hope he can make a physical announcement or physical appearance.
I think it'll be difficult. If you think about what's happened to Kizza Besigye, he's been jailed now for a year, and he was actually renditioned. He was kidnapped by the Ugandan authorities from Kenya, brought to Uganda, and then tried in a military court, and he's still in prison, and he's very, very ill at the moment. So if Chagulani gets gotten hold of, he's the biggest thorn in the flesh of Museveni because he's so popular. And so he will do anything he can to get rid of him.
All right. Well, that's how we end the show. Rise and shine on this Friday. We'll catch up with you on Monday. Join us bright and early at 6 a.m. Central African time. But do stay tuned to Channel Africa for the rest of the programming. Me, Asanda, Beda, I'm signing out with
Peter Ndoro. We hand over to On the Move.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126.
I can see my whole world changing.
And contribute to the conversation.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m. Central Africa time, and it's time for On the Move with myself, Palesa Dau, and Benjamin Mushadama. On the other side of the news update, here's Jolane Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Balesa. Top stories is while the AU ends its suspension of Guinea and the US officially has left the World Health Organization. Good morning. The African Union has said it's ending its suspension of Guinea imposed since a military coup in 2021. It follows a return to constitutional rule under an elected president. Tabiso Lehoko has the story.
The African Union's Peace and Security Council said it was inviting Guinea to immediately resume its participation in AU activities. The council commended Guinea's adoption of a new constitution and December's presidential election won by the coup leader, General Mamadi Doumbouya. The former president Alpha Conde and the longtime opposition leader, Selo Delaine Diallo, were both barred from running. Some opposition parties and civil society groups called the vote a sham. Since 2020, Guinea was one of the 5 West African countries in which the military seized power.
Legal analyst in South Africa, Mpumelelo Zikalala, says it is highly unlikely that EFF leader Julius Malema will get custodial sentence and possibly even get a suspended one. This as Malema is scheduled to attend pre-sentencing proceedings at the East London Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape province today. Malema was found guilty of discharging a firearm during the party's 5th birthday celebrations at the Sisa Tukashe Stadium in Mdantsane back in 2018. His conviction includes the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging a firearm in a built-up area, and reckless endangerment. Zikalala elaborates.
Here in this case, no one died. There's no one who got injured. It was a discharging of a firearm. Yes, it's a serious allegation, but at the same time,